Good morning, you guys. It's your boy Ben Mahari here, representing Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. Much love to the entire LDBC and the basketball community. If you want more basketball content, tune in to Basketball Conversations every Friday night, 9 p.m. Central Time. This is where we discuss basketball-related topics, news, debates, and everything else in the world of basketball. If you are new to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon to get all the latest notifications when I start dropping videos and live streams. So, we got another morning of historical perspective. This is the weekly episode show that I always do Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Central Time, where I review, historical perspectives on great series, players, teams, whatever you want me to talk about. All you got to do is comment to me on the comment section, and I will do a video for you ASAP Rocky. So this time around, we're going to talk about one of the greatest shooters in the history of NBA basketball, and a guy that used to hold the record for most three-pointers made in his entire career, Mr. Reggie Miller. And this was the kind of guy that basically played through his entire career with the Indiana Pacers when he originally was drafted as the 11th overall pick in the 1987 NBA draft. So let's talk about his background and his early life. He was born in Riverside, California, okay? And he grew up basically with hip deformities, which prevented him from walking correctly, and had to wear different braces on both his legs and his hips until he got old enough where his legs finally showed much more strength, where he didn't have to wear any braces anymore, and was old enough to and basically grew enough to compensate it. And so his family was basically an athletic family. His brother Daryl was a former Major League Baseball pitcher and a former catcher. His sister Tammy played volleyball at Cal State Fullerton, and his sister, formerly known as Miss Cheryl Miller, is a Hall of Fame basketball player, and she was a member of the 1984 U.S. gold medal winning basketball team. You know what I'm saying? Former national champion, and one of the few women to ever score over 100 points in high school. So this pretty much goes to show you that Miller grew up in a very athletic family, and his parents were pretty much a military background type of family led by his father. All right. Reggie recalls during the time when he was a child that Cheryl used to beat him one on one, in prior game in one on one games, and he would quit. He would quit. They would quit playing when he could finally block one of Cheryl's shots. All right, and he used to talk so much trash to the point where Cheryl Miller would basically wanted to beat the crap out of him. And Red, Reggie used to get owned by her sister nonstop. She was just much more stronger, much more powerful than him. And in the ESPN documentary of the Pacers and Knicks rivalry during the '90s, Cheryl would talk about how her brother used to talk nonstop trash all game long. You know what I'm saying? And then talked about the time when Reggie had his first 50-point game the same night that Cheryl scored over 100 points in an actual high school game. I mean, what can you say, huh? So the way that he learned his jump shot was that he learned his unorthodox shooting style was basically developed by his arc over his shot over his sister constantly blocking his shots. So when he talked about shooting above his head and shooting with a higher arc, the reason why it became so pronounced with him was because he used it in a way to prevent his sister from blocking his shots, because Cheryl was a powerful person, and she used to destroy all the boys in her neighborhood back in the day. So he had to learn that shot to basically try to counter her tall length and athleticism. Then, as he got older, after high school, after finishing Riverside Polytech High School, he basically attended UCLA, where he received a degree in history. During the 84-85 season, he helped the UCLA Bruins to an NIT championship. And during his senior year, he was all Pac-10 selection for the second straight year, then led the Bruins to the Pac-10 regular season championship and the first Pac-10 conference championship tournament. But when the three-point field goal was instituted by the NCAA during the 86-87 season, he made 69 of his 247 field goal attempts for three-point range. But however, one of his most memorable moments against Notre Dame, against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, was back on January 24th of 1987, where Reggie hit a clutch 24-footer shot to basically beat the Notre Dame Fighting Irish 62-59. And then another memorable game was against the defending national champions at the time, Louisville, led by Purvis Ellison. All right, where he scored 33 points in the second half, which to this day is still a school record. All right. He finished his entire college career second all time in career scoring behind Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And as of 2009, he still holds the UCLA record for the most league points, highest scoring average, most free throws, and holds several individual game records. As his jersey was retired in 2013. Then we get down to his professional career. Okay, so in the '87 draft, the Pacers drafted 11th. Okay, this was the time when Steve Alford helped lead the Indiana Hoosiers to the national championship, and all of Indiana wanted the Pacers to draft him above Reggie Miller because of ticket sales and then the publicity, things that in the third. But Donnie Walsh, who was the general manager at the time, made the bold decision to draft Reggie Miller above Steve Alford, and at that time, fans were not happy about that. They felt like that they were being robbed of the opportunity to see Steve Alford, continue his career in Indiana. He was drafted 26 overall by the Dallas Mavericks. And looking back at that time, looking back at that time, it was no doubt about it was no doubt an excellent pick. And even Alford embraced that decision. When Alford said years later, not only it was a much better decision, better draft choice than drafting me. Reggie turned out to be a great pick and turned out to be great for the state of Indiana. And the ironic thing is, Steve Alford only played 4 seasons in the NBA, mostly with the Mavericks, and only played 1 season with the Golden State Warriors. And he only started 3 games and scored 744 points and had 176 assists during those 4 years when he was in the NBA. So I think it turned out a lot better. And I'm sure a lot of Indiana Pacer fans would agree with that. So when he got to Indiana, okay, he was pretty much the guy that was kind of the second sidekick to then Chuck Person at the time, who basically went on to win Rookie of the Year. But after making his first All Star appearance in 1990, after the Pacers traded Chuck Person to Minnesota during the '92 offseason, then he became the franchise player. And then on November 28th of 1992, he scored his career high 57 points against the Charlotte Hornets, where he basically shot 60 to 29 from the field, 4 of 11 from 3-point range, 21 to 23 from the free throw line. The 57 sport he scored is still the second highest scoring total in the NBA during that season, only behind Michael Jordan's 64 that he scored against Orlando on January the 16th, which is months down the line. And it still stands as the Pacers scoring record. When Jermaine O'Neal had a chance to beat the record of 57 points in 2004, he chose not to out of respect for Reggie Miller, which is very, very classy by him to do that. He helped lead the Indiana Pacers to the playoffs basically in 1990 and 91, 92, and also in 93, but ran into some good teams like the Celtics. I should say the Pistons first in 1990, the Celtics back-to-back years, and then their arch rivals, the Knicks, in 93. But midway through the 93-94 year, things began to change for the Pacers. So they hired Larry Brown as a new head coach. Then the second half of the season, they basically pretty much went 35-5 during the second half of the year to finish with 47 regular season victories. Okay. Then they had a Cinderella run to their first trip to the Eastern Conference Finals. All right. And Miller became a household name to all of New York fans. Then in Game 5, in which the series was decided 2 games apiece, the Pacers were down by many as 15 points heading into that game. Then in the fourth quarter, Reggie Miller turned it on. Thanks to some trash talking by Spike Lee sitting courtside, Reggie Miller scored 25 points in the fourth quarter alone to finish out the game with scoring 39 points in a 93-86 victory against the Knicks in Madison Square Garden, which was one of the greatest scoring exhibitions you'll ever find in the history of basketball. All right? From that point forward, people took Miller seriously after that. Unfortunately, the Pacers were not the Bulls at that time because remember, the Knicks were up 2-0 against the Pacers and lost 3 straight. The previous year in '93, the the Knicks were up 2-0 against the Bulls and went on to win four straight. But the Pacers had a chance to close out the game, but John Starks turned in a 26 point performance in Game 6 that pretty much put them in a Game 7. All right, and then they went on to win the series in 7 games. Then the next year, Miller made the All Star team in '95, and then basically won the Central Division title with 52 regular season victories. Then in the second round series, when they made the Knicks once again, the Pacers were trailing 105 to 95 with about 18.7 seconds remaining. This is where history was made. So then Miller took the inbound pass from Mark Jackson and drilled a three-pointer to cut the lead, basically cut the lead to 105 to 102. Then during the inbound pass, Anthony Mason was taking the ball inbounds. So therefore, Miller was trying to defend the inbound pass and accidentally pushed Greg Anthony. No foul was called, and then Anthony Mason basically inadvertently passed the ball when he thought Greg Anthony was open into the hands of Reggie Miller, who had the guts to turn around, get back to the three-point line, and drill another three right in front of Spike Lee's face. Game was tied. But then there was some more drama to that. Then Sam Mitchell, who was a reserve at that time, accidentally fouled John Starks, in which Sam Mitchell later admitted that they were down. He thought they were down by by at least 1 or 2 points. So then after that, John Starks missed both free throws. And then even though Ewing got the offensive rebound, he missed his shot, was a little bit long and hit the back of the rim. Then Miller got the rebound with 7.5 seconds left in the game, made both of those free throws. Then the Knicks had a chance to win it, but then they didn't even get a shot out because Anthony basically drove towards the baseline, tripped, and they did not get a shot off. Bedlam and just dead silence entered in Madison Square Garden. Nobody couldn't believe what happened in that game because most of the Knicks fans left thinking that they won the game. When the other Knicks fans who stayed in the building had to tell the fans that left that they actually lost. Go figure, huh? But that date of May 7th, 1995 was a historical day because then on that same day, the Houston Rockets came back down six points with about 5 minutes to go to beat the Utah Jazz, who owned the third best record in the NBA that year, to keep their championship reign alive. Then on the same day too, Michael Jordan had his infamous strip against Nick Anderson in the playoffs in that first game. Just a historical day of NBA basketball. So the Indiana Pacers held a 3-1 lead against the New York Knicks, but then Patrick Ewing had his own controversy. In Game 5, he made a spinning jump shot to win the game in Game 5, but he did travel. You cannot convince me otherwise. He traveled, but he got away with it. And the Knicks came back to tie the series at 3-3. And so pretty much with the series on the line, all right? With the series on the line, the Pacers and the Knicks went down to a 7th and final game, and it came down to the final possession with 5 seconds remaining. That's when Ewing had a chance to tie the game. He drove the ball away from the double team, spanned to his right, drove down the lane, and went for a finger roll layup instead of a dunk, and it hit the back of the rim. Series over, season over. The Pacers went on to the Eastern Conference Finals for the second straight year, where they went on to lose in 7 games again at the hands of the Shaq and Penny and the Orlando Magic. So pretty much by that time, the Pacers pretty much owned the Knicks from that point. Okay, in those years between '93 and '95, he was averaging 19 points per game and was one among the league leaders in free throw percentage, shooting between 86 to 90% from the free throw line those years. And those were great years. You had Rick Smits, you had the Davis boys, you had Derek McKee, you had Mark Jackson. You know what I'm saying? I mean, those were great Indiana teams during the mid-'90s. Okay. Then you fast forward to 1998. Okay. They faced against the Chicago Bulls. All right. And as you guys know in the documentary, the Bulls and the Pacers tied their season series, and they were pretty much rivals up to that point. And a little historical fashion, '93, Michael Jordan and Reggie Miller had their little scuffle with one another, in which Reggie pushed Jordan to the to the photographer's row. Then Jordan came back, grappled Reggie, and then punched him in the lip in '93. That was great. So another historical moment of Miller's career um, came in Game Four when they were basically down by down by at least what 2 to 3 points. Actually, yeah, they were down by 1 point with 3 seconds left. And then which Reggie Miller came off the several screens, pushed off Michael Jordan to try to force a foul call to see if they were going to call the foul. They didn't. Caught the inbound pass, drilled the 3-pointer to get the Pacers to win. But there was still zero point 0.7 seconds left on the clock. Then after that, Jordan caught the inbound pass, basically turned around, did a double clutch, and it missed off the rim and it bounced out. Series tied up 2 games apiece, and people forget Reggie Miller also had a bad ankle during that series and basically was injured, rattled throughout the entire series. But the Bulls went on to win the series in 7 games, and in which Reggie Miller faded in the final 2 minutes. He only got 2 shots in the fourth quarter, and so there were times during that series where Miller had his moments, but did not step up to the plate when it was needed the most. And you also got to give credit to Jordan and Pippen for great defense too. But after Jordan and the Bulls won their last championship, okay, the Pacers had a chance in 1999 to redeem themselves of that loss, but they lost in 6 games at the hands of the 8-seeded New York Knicks that was injured riddled that year. And one of Miller's worst games, where he shot at least 2 of 15 from the field in Madison Square Garden, had one of the worst shooting games of his career, and it came at the bad time. But eventually, the next year, um, in 2000, the Pacers finally broke through, and Miller redeemed himself by scoring 34 points in Game 6 against the Knicks, 17 in the fourth quarter to clinch a series and get himself to the NBA Finals for the first time in franchise history, where they eventually ran into Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant and the Lakers and lost in 6 games. Great series from both of these guys, but that but the Lakers knew their time was now, and there was no way that the Pacers were going to beat them during that series, even though they made it interesting. And so Miller continued to produce clutch moments. In 2002, Miller almost single-handedly eliminated the top seed in the Eastern Conference, the New Jersey Nets, led by Jason Kidd, Kenyon Martin, Richard Jefferson, them guys. In the fifth and deciding game, following 2 missed free throws by Richard Jefferson, Miller set the game into overtime by hitting a 40-foot banker off the glass to send the game into OT. Bedlam, baby, bedlam. Then in the first overtime, Reggie Miller drove down the lane and basically drew a two-handed jam to send the game into a second overtime, in which eventually the Pacers went on to lose the game and the series. But that game proved to be another great moment in the legend of his career. But by the time between 2003 to 2005, Miller was pretty much much more older at that point and start deferring his leadership roles to All-Star Jermaine O'Neal and Ron Artest. But they had one great chance in 2004. The Pacers went on to win 61 regular season games and the top seed in the Eastern Conference. They made it back to the Eastern Conference Finals, where they went up against the defensive-minded Detroit Pistons. And in Game 2 of that series, in which the Pacers were down by 2 points, Reggie Miller had an open layup ready to tie the ball game before Tayshaun Prince ran in a dead sprint, complete dead sprint, to block his shot and send it back. One of the all-time greatest chase down blocks you will ever see in NBA history. Probably much more better than the LeBron James chase down block back in 2016. But it was one of the greatest moments of his career, one of the great moments of Tayshaun Prince's career. And as a little bit of a compliment, he actually gave Tayshaun Prince his jersey and autographed it and just giving him a compliment for that great defensive play. Just it was a great play. So 2005 was pretty much his last year in the NBA. But unfortunately, because of the brawl at the Palace during that year, Jermaine O'Neal, Steven Jackson, Ron Artest served lengthy suspensions over that brawl, and unfortunately, they only finished with the what is it the fourth best record? Actually, no, the sixth best record in the conference that year. And Reggie, you know what I'm saying, retired at made his confirmed his retirement before the start of the season. And on his last game in Conseco Fieldhouse, he scored 20. Miller led the team with 27 points, making 11 out of 16 field goal attempts, including four from 3-point range, until he was basically taken out of the ball game, in which he received a huge standing ovation from the Conseco Fieldhouse and the entire Pacers and Piston teams, making it his final game of his career. That moment actually earned him the SB's Best Moment Award. So during the course of his 18-year career, he was one of 5 players who spent his entire career with 18 or more seasons with a single franchise, and he is one of 8 players to join the 50 and 40 and 90 club when he made over 2,560 career three-pointers made, which was an NBA record at the time before Ray Allen broke that record basically back in 2012. All right, and he was able to make his induction into the NBA Hall of Fame uh, as a player basically around was it 2000 basically just 2013 or something like that. Yeah, 2000. I think it was let me check real quick, just real quick. Reggie Miller Hall of Fame induction. That year he made the Hall of Fame. Basically, he made the Hall of Fame in 2012. Okay, 2012. And so Miller is going to be remembered for as one of the all-time greatest shooters and one of the greatest clutch shooters in NBA history, and literally held the franchise on his back. Something that unfortunately not many people can say, and pretty much why that proves to the point why Pippen doesn't get much of the same kind of credit that Reggie Miller does, despite the championships. But the one thing I remember about what Reggie Miller was is that despite his skinny frame, he was so excellent of coming off of screens, and he was good at creating contact to make you think that you're fouling him when actually he was actually doing the contact. And so he was pretty much a guy that can be a very annoying. He was very good defensive player and very tough motivational leader for those Pacers. And it's unfortunate that they played in the 90s, because if those Pacers played in that 2000 era or in today's era, they would have won at least one championship. But they ran into Jordan many times, and unfortunately, like all the great players in the 90s, they failed their chance against the great Michael Jordan. And so, but it doesn't diminish, what he was able to do as a basketball player. And he'll be remembered as one of the all-time greatest scorers in NBA history, and without a doubt, one of the top 2 or top 3 greatest shooters in NBA history. I have him maybe at number 2 all-time behind Ray Allen. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section, and let me know what you guys think of your memories of Reggie Miller.